Again, thank you all for joining. This afternoon, we'll discuss strategies for success in securing CDMRP funding. And I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Tanisha Jackson. I'm the Scientific Program Director for Melanoma Research Alliance. And we have our speakers for today, Dr. Amie Bunker. She's the Program Manager for Melanoma Research Program, the CDMRP program for the DoD. And she'll discuss the Melanoma Research Program and their current opportunities. Dr. Genevieve Boland joins us from Mass General, and she is the section head of melanoma and sarcoma surgery at the hospital. Also serves as director of surgical oncology and research laboratories. She's a CDMRP awardee for fiscal year 2022 for the Focus Program Award on Rare Melanomas. She's also an MRA awardee. We have Dr. Zheng from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He is the director of melanoma research there and a member of the Department of Biomedical Sciences. He is also a CDMRP awardee for the Mid-Career Accelerator Award for the Melanoma Research Program, and also Melanoma Research Alliance awardee. So I'd briefly like to describe Melanoma Research Alliance. We were founded in 2007 with the mission of ending suffering and death from melanoma. We're the largest nonprofit funder for melanoma research worldwide, and we've granted over $150 million in research funds to support therapies and prevention and cures for melanoma. And 100% of our donations go directly to fund the investigators here and all melanoma research. I'd like to hand it over to CDMRP Program Director, Amie Bunker.
Thank you very much, Tanisha, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm very happy to be here today. And so I won't belabor too many points with the next few slides. I just want to give a brief introduction of who the Melanoma Research Program is, who the congressionally directed medical research programs are, and some of our funding opportunities that we have currently available. So yes, we are a program that's fully dedicated to funding melanoma research. We have existed since fiscal year 2019, and we are committed to diminishing the disease burden of melanoma on service members, on our veterans, and also the general population. For FY23, we have received $40 million in appropriations for melanoma research. And if you want to know more about the MRP, where we come from, you can see our webpage listed at the bottom of the slide there, cdmrp.health.mil/MRP. And I will also, before we go too much further, just make the usual disclaimers of I am speaking to you today as a not, you know, my opinions are my own, but these are here representing the program. Next slide, please. So for our fiscal year 23 opportunities, as the program has grown, we really want to make sure we're filling a niche and complementing the efforts of other melanoma funders like the MRA, like the NIH, like other funding organizations. And so to do that, we have really carved out these three strategic areas and developed a series of focus areas that for the applicants really need to address as part of their applications to the program. And these three areas are prevention, rare melanomas, and survivorship, which is new for us this year. For prevention, we really are challenging the melanoma community to expand the concept of what melanoma prevention means, to be beyond sunscreen, beyond protective clothing, but really getting to preventing the progression of disease, understanding melanomagenesis, understanding the mechanisms of dissemination, and all of these other more nuanced areas. For rare melanomas, we acknowledge that these are understudied areas of melanoma. And because of that, there is a whole dearth of knowledge about the whole process of what are the risk factors, how do they start, We know they respond differently to immunotherapy. So what are better therapeutic options out there for them? So we accept applications across the whole research spectrum for rare melanomas. And then this year, as I mentioned, new for us is getting into some survivorship areas. Because of the advent of immunotherapies, melanoma patients are living a lot longer with more advanced stages of disease. So we really need to do better by them and understanding how to reduce treatment toxicities, help them deal with fertility issues, and just overall really help improve their quality of life these days. This is just a real high-level explanation of them. These areas and the focus areas associated with them are explained in more detail in each of the individual funding opportunities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for our FY23 opportunities, we started off the year with 5 mechanisms: the IDEA Award, the Melanoma Academy Scholar Award, Mid-Career Accelerator Award, Team Science Award, and our Focus Program Award for Rare Melanomas. The pre-application submission deadline has already passed for the IDEA Awards. So if you submitted a pre-application for those, you would be receiving your invitation to submit full applications. The notifications are actually posted today. And the deadlines to submit full applications are September 22nd. For the other 4 mechanisms, those only require a letter of intent. There's no screening, there's no invitation process for any of those, but you do need to submit that letter of intent no later than August 31st. And then all full applications for these other 4 opportunities are due on September 22nd as well. Those deadlines are very important, and I won't belabor a lot of the details of these, but if you can see the QR code that's on the corner of the slide there, if you want to scan that, that'll take you directly to a reference table that we have that really gets into summarizing the key points of each of these mechanisms. But basically, we have Melanoma Academy that started in FY20. So this will be for the 3rd cohort of scholars joining that academy. The Mid-Career Accelerator Award, Dr. Zheng can speak a little bit more to that, but this is really people who have aged out of most early career investigator type mechanisms, but perhaps need a little bit more time to really establish them in the field and more fully compete with the fully established investigators. Our Team Science Award is really hoping to bring together multidisciplinary research. There are so many questions that need to be answered out there, and the scope of these questions has really grown so that it's nearly impossible for one investigator working in one lab to really make impactful contributions to the field and move the science forward. So we're trying to tackle that challenge with the Team Science Award. And then the Focus Program Award with Rare Melanomas. Only applications that are going to study rare melanomas are accepted for this specific mechanism. And again, we're really just trying to move the needle in various aspects of rare melanoma research. So next slide, please. With that, any further ado, I will hand it over to our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amie. Dr. Boland, can you provide a brief background on your melanoma research, and what words of advice would you give to colleagues that have never applied before for CDMRP funding?
Great, yes, thank you for the invitation. And I also will start with the caveat that these are my opinions only, so I don't necessarily represent the CDMRP. But it's been a great opportunity. Both the MRA has offered some amazing opportunities, and the CDMRP. For me personally, we've been interested in rare melanomas for some time. So both of my funding for these mechanisms have related to rare melanomas, which we've been studying cutaneous melanoma for the last decade, and really, I think, made some huge inroads into our understanding. But as was mentioned already, we really don't know that much biologically about how these other melanomas, which are not as responsive to existing therapies, respond. So that's been a big focus of my lab and the funding. But more broadly, kind of advice relating to this mechanism. It is a unique mechanism. I think for me, when I applied to any grant, I try to think about what are the needs of the funding agency. So in this case, a focus on active military personnel, veterans, or their families, and really just start with kind of what are the unanswered questions? How does this problem impact these particular populations? And I spend a lot of time reading the RFA, which I think Dr. Bunker mentioned already, like what the programmatic goals are and how does that align with the questions I want to ask. As I mentioned, we've been very interested in the rare melanomas, so mucosal, acral, and uveal to some degree. One thing I just really wanted to mention that I think has been unique about the CDMRP mechanism is with the Scholar Awards and some of these other opportunities, it really feels like an opportunity to not just fund projects, but actually to build people and their careers, which has been really nice. It seems a little bit more broad. So I think that's a unique opportunity. And then I'm happy to answer some specifics on the mechanism. I think one thing for me that I thought was really important for the CDMRP is really thinking about the statement of work, which isn't always a part of other types of grants, but it really is kind of the roadmap of your project and something you're going to use again and again as sort of an anchoring piece. So for me, that's been very helpful. Pause to see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Dr. Boland. Dr. Zheng, would you be able to provide any tips for MRA or CDMRP funding, and how is it different from any MRA funding applications or NIH funding?
Yeah. First, again, thank you for the invitation to participate in this. And also want to mention that, again, I got various support from both MIA and DOD over the years. And the first grant I had received out of my own library was a Young Investigator Award from MIA, so I really appreciate the support over the years. And in terms of CDMRP Melanoma Program, I would say probably just say a little bit about the Mid-Career Award. It's pretty unique here. Not that many organizations offer this type of award. And mid-career scientists, this is really a group of scientists who I think are really underfunded. And we don't have the advantage of new investigator status for, they say, for NIH. And as you know, there are so many other opportunities for early career researchers from all kinds of different foundations. And sometimes it's hard to compete with really senior investigators and leaders who have lots of more resources. And it's extremely hard, in my opinion, to get your first R1 renewed or get a second R1. So at this mid-career award from CDMRP, it's really could be quite helpful. And in terms of tips, I think it's really important to, again, this is still a career development grant, so it's really important to think about that, maybe to develop a mid-career, some kind of career plan just for particular to advance from mid-career to more advanced stage. I think as a requirement, you need to put in a continuity development plan, I think. So really want to pay attention to that. And related to that, maybe to tune your proposals towards more like include some components that have the opportunity to collaborate with leaders in the field and hopefully get some collaboration letter from them to support your research. To me, I feel that could be a plus. And for the career plan, they also want you to think about how to build your career visibility in the field. And I think, again, it's really important for that. And I believe they also offer the opportunity to collaborate as part of the grant mechanism to collaborate with members of the Melanoma Academy, the senior leaders and potential also some junior investigators. Again, I think it would be really helpful. I think I can probably stop here. Let's see whether there's anything, questions or maybe any other points. Yeah.
For the participants, feel free to ask any questions in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute and ask the panelists directly. I do have a question for Dr. Amie Bunker. How much of your research funding portfolio would you say is geared towards therapeutics versus prevention of melanoma?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but for the most part, we're going to be looking at what we're looking for is in the funding opportunities, like Genevieve had mentioned, and really looking in the award information section for one area, the program description, looking in the focus areas. And so we don't put set limits of we're going to fund, you know, I showed 3 strategic goals, for example, of prevention, rare melanomas, and survivorship. So we don't come into every cycle saying, okay, we're going to put X% into prevention, X% into rare melanomas, et cetera. It really, we leave ourselves that flexibility to see what types of applications we get submitted. We can't fund things that we don't receive. And then that's just the quality of those and how well thought out the applications are. So we keep it pretty general, and historically, again, past performance doesn't necessarily speak to future investments, but therapeutics hasn't been a strong investment area for our program, because again, it seems other area we're trying to carve out that niche for ourselves. So NIH puts a lot of investment into therapeutics, for example. So that's, I won't say we don't fund it, but it's not a big interest for the program unless it's more of a prevention, and unless it fits into those focus areas that we have laid out. And we leave that to the applicants to make that case to us. If they think their research meets the intent of that focus area, then they have the application materials to sell that point for the reviewers.
I have a question. I have an idea award from DoD, and so I was wondering, because that's it's supposed to lay the foundation for a larger award or further funding, and give you preliminary data. Would the next logical step be to request a Mid-Career Accelerator Award if I'm sort of new to the field of melanoma?
As long as you meet the eligibility requirements, one of the program requirements for a Mid-Career Accelerator Award is that you have preliminary data in melanoma. So if you've have the idea award and you've collected that preliminary data, you've certainly checked off at least one of those boxes already. And then it just comes down, there are certain other eligibility, so that you would just have to make sure that you meet those. They're pretty broad, but, and again, I get asked about, one of the more frequent questions we get our PIs asking about, I see this eligibility criteria, here's my description, am I eligible? And that's not really a question that I can answer. It's not a question, if you submit it to the help desk, they're not going to give you a yes, no response. That is just part of the application materials. There's an eligibility statement for the Mid-Career Accelerator Award and the Scholar Award. And so if you think you meet those eligibility criteria, that's your place to tell us how. And then the reviewers, that's just part of the review criteria.
But there's not an age or years from PhD or something like that, a time limit.
In the mid-career, in both the Scholar and the Mid-Career Accelerator Award, there are those limits. And so I don't quote me, always refer back to the program announcement definitively, but it's going to be for the Mid-Career Accelerator Award, you have to be at least 7 years post first faculty appointment as the lower limit of eligibility. And you can't be a full professor or equivalent, because we know different institutions have different titles and structures, but we're really looking for you're not an instructor, you're not a research professor, but you are 7 years post, you're something equivalent to an assistant professor, but you haven't reached that full professor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
For your question, Dr. Engel. I have a question. So would you say that submitting your proposals from your grants administration office was like a smooth process? Are there any additional documents that you might have to prepare differently than you would say for an NIH submission? Either one of you can answer this, Dr. Zheng or Dr. Boland.
I think we'll probably both maybe take it on. It is a different process, and I think the more you've done it, the more familiar it becomes in terms of, the requirements are slightly different. So it's helpful to give yourself a little extra time, and your administrators, I'm fortunate my grant admin is familiar with the CDMRP, so it's been very helpful. She gives me a checklist and we go through it. But it certainly is, and I mentioned already, I think for me, one of the major things I think about more here is the statement of work, because it really does sort of delineate what exactly you're going to do.
I would probably just add a little bit. I mean, when I first applied for CDMRP award, I feel the impression was there are tons of supporting documents, but in a way, once I prepare that, it seems a lot of them are just in a way redundant. You basically still can prepare similar document like other NIH grant. You have the innovation, you have the impact. In an NIH grant, R1, you put everything together. Here, you just need to separate it out and maybe to expand a little bit more. So to me, it's always it's quite similar. And again, you always want to prepare early. And yeah, that's pretty much yeah. If you prepare early, it will be okay. They are quite similar.
Okay, so the take-home point is to prepare early. The supporting documents are very similar, and you working with an experienced grant administrator is also helpful. Are there any additional questions from the participants for today? So I have an additional question. I've been reading some of the background on CDMRP Melanoma Research Program, application requirements, and it mentioned, DoD is interested in high-risk projects. Would you say that high-risk projects are ideal for MRP funding? And this would be for, I guess, Amie.
Depends on the mechanism. I'd say the IDEA award is probably the best place for the really high risk, high reward types of projects. We're really trying to tackle innovation and get new ideas and understand that sometimes they're going to fail. We don't require preliminary data. So we really try to get that point across, that when we say we don't want preliminary data, we want this to be a novel idea new to the field. We mean it, and we try to make sure that gets across at all points of the review cycle. For other projects, especially if they require preliminary data, there's going to be some elements that we still want innovation, we still want impactful, but it has to make sense, and there needs to be a little bit more support for how those ideas are going to be developed. So we try to give all of those aspects, something for the really new, really exciting, give us your crazy ideas, but also you've already developed something, you have something built up and you want to pursue it and you want to take it to the next step. And so by nature, those are probably going to be less risky. I mean, it's still science that things don't always go the way you see. And that's sometimes they take left turns and whatnot. And that's just how things go. But at the end of the day, we want to move the field forward. We don't. There's a great line that someone and another arena had mentioned, so I'm going to steal it. It's we don't, the idea is to go bench to bedside, not bench to bookshelf. We helping investigators develop and get tenure and get their next grant, that's important. We need that, but we exist to serve the consumers. We exist to serve the melanoma patients and their families. And so they're interested in seeing outcomes and the field moving forward. So at the end of the day, that's what we really want to impress upon our applicants, and why we ask for impact statements, why we ask for the development plans. Like, what's your vision? What's next? If this is successful, where could this go? So that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Amy. I'm gonna have to steal that bench to bookshelf. We don't want that.
Great line.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions in the chat. This is from Michael Markey. At our institution, a research faculty is someone whose primary responsibility is research. Did I hear correctly that research faculty are ineligible for the Mid-Career Accelerator Awards?
And see, this is why there's no hard or set, we don't put really rigid descriptions on these eligibility requirements. They're intentionally vague because there are so many iterations of what people's roles are called, how they fill the niche. And so that's why my answer is always going to be, if you think you fit the intent of what we're trying to accomplish, where we're trying to, someone has some background in melanoma, whether, they have some kind of preliminary data that they've already collected, and they have a solid research idea, and they can make a case for themselves meeting that eligibility criteria, then that will just be, that's not going to be assessed until the review cycle. That's not something I can answer. I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just, we understand that's a very fluid thing to do. So that's on you to make you the case for yourself.
I don't know whether I can jump in a little bit. I'm not sure whether about the question. Again, this is just my own opinion. I actually feel like the only thing that is ineligible would be if you are already a full professor. So I would say, in your question, you said research faculty. To me, without knowing too much about what it is, to me, that doesn't mean it's a full professor. As long as you are not a full professor and you are more than 7 years, my understanding is it should be eligible. But again, just my opinion. I'm not sure about all the details of your case.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. This may go to Dr. Boland. For the focus program, Rare Melanoma, it requires 2 to 3 projects. Do these projects need to come from different institutions, or can they come from the same institution? And maybe Amy can help with this.
Yeah, Amy might need to help me here, because I don't recall what is required. Our program happened to come from different institutions, and we found that to be helpful in terms of skills and collaboration. So we did, within each of the 2 projects, have people from different institutions, and that's sort of how functionally how ours came to be. I don't know if that's a requirement.
It's not a requirement. It's open. It's just doesn't matter where the researchers are based, just as long as the projects are, as you said, separate and not totally dependent on each other. You can be at the same institution, or you can have collaborations across institutions.
Well, we've come to time for this brief webinar on strategies for success in securing CDMRP funding. I'll add my contact information in the chat. You can reach out to me for any questions, and I can try to answer them or share them also with Dr. Bunker here. So please, feel free to reach out to us. This program is so important. We actually end up funding some of the same investigators on different projects, but we work hand in hand. It's a partnership between MRA and CDMRP. And we love the work that they do in the areas of prevention of melanoma and support for, mid-career investigators where MRA doesn't really provide support for that. So bravo to CDMRP and Dr. Zheng for his work in that field. And then Dr. Boland, she's been like a valuable investigator with MRA and working in teams and lots of other areas in like getting information out to patients with melanoma. And we really appreciate her participating in this webinar for this afternoon.
And
Again,
thank you for organizing it.
oh, you're
Great,
welcome. Thank you. And again, this webinar will be able to be found on our Melanoma Research Alliance YouTube site. So I will share that information with webinar participants, and it'll live there. You can go back and look at some of the questions and answers and get the information or share it with some of your colleagues. All right. And thank you so much. We appreciate you participating.